Hi, everybody. Vasu Vadaparty here with the VPartySports podcast for this Friday afternoon. Here with the Kansas City Chiefs pre- and post-game show host, Darren Smith. Obviously, big game for them, divisional weekend. They had the bye week as the number one seed. They've got the Jacksonville Jaguars after that improbable comeback last Saturday night against the Los Angeles Chargers. We welcome in Darren Smith again to the VPartySports podcast. Hi, Darren. How are you? Long time no see.
Yeah, doing well. Thank you so much for having me, Vasu. Always good to talk to you, and can't wait to see what you got in store for us.
All right, well, let's get right to it. Then we've got the NFL this weekend. First of all, the wild card games. Before we get to Kansas City specifically, tell me what you thought of the 6 games over the weekend, just as a macro level view, not necessarily related to KC, but just overall the weekend itself.
I thought it was pretty good. I mean, I think there might have been maybe 1 or 2 games that I wasn't real impressed with. I think probably, I'd say the Seattle Seahawks. I thought they put up a better fight than they did against the 49ers. And the Minnesota Vikings, that left a lot to be desired. I will say, though, that if the two teams that needs a quarterback the most, the Miami Dolphins and the Baltimore Ravens, I think the coaching, if they'd have put them in a better position, I think they could have both pulled upsets against Cincinnati and Buffalo. But other than that, I mean, I thought it was a pretty good, exciting weekend of football, especially obviously the comeback from behind victory that the Jaguars did against the Los Angeles Chargers.
Yeah, every game was close except for the 49ers game that they took over in the second half, like they've done all year on this 10-game winning streak that they've had. But let's get to your game here. The Kansas City Chiefs, they have the number one seed. They have played well, 14-3. Obviously, Buffalo and Cincinnati didn't play the equal number of games. Let's get to that first. Actually, it's pretty interesting. We lose you for a second here?
Yeah, I'm trying to see what happened. Give me 1 second.
Okay.
And I apologize for that.
No, that's all right. That's all right. You can hear me, though. That's all right.
Oh, yeah, no, I can hear you. But what was your question? I'm saying that the
that's all right. Let's just take the scenario real quick, just in case. There you are. Kansas City and Buffalo play. We know what happened. Obviously, the number one thing is that DeMar Hamlin is okay, and that's all beyond football stuff. But this Chiefs and Bills scenario for a neutral site game, if they play each other, is going to be set up in Atlanta at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. First of all, both teams play outdoors, so I thought it funny to be indoors to begin with. Secondly, what do you think of the solution the NFL came up with as far as this? This is the only scenario, right, for a neutral site game, if I read it right?
Yeah, that's correct. If Cincinnati wins, the game will be played in Kansas City. And obviously, if the Jaguars pull an upset, then the winner of Sunday's game will host the AFC Championship game. But I'm not a big fan of it, only because, I mean, it's an inconvenience for me if we play Buffalo. But I don't like where the league is headed, because if it's a good showing, good ratings, and a lot of fans travel, this might give the NFL an excuse to try to do this with the other championship with the NFC, and they may try to do this for future dates and having neutral sites for the division games, just like they do the Super Bowl.
Right.
The flip side is that if you do that, then it kind of defeats the purpose of having home field advantage, because you only get one game versus 2. If you're like a team like the number 2 seed, then you get 2 home games versus 1 if you're versus the number 1 seed. So I'm not real enthused about it. I mean, look, if we have to go to Atlanta, if I have to go to Atlanta, I go to Atlanta. It is what it is, but it's just not really. I actually think that it's not going to come to that, but we'll just have to wait and see.
I wish if they were going to do that, and I understand why they did it and all that. I mean, I don't think it was particularly fair. And I know Cincinnati was, at the time they postponed the game. I knew that they were complaining that they're getting the short end of the straw and all that. But
I would agree.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I would say that I would agree with that. I mean, they were leading 7-3, and of course, with the cancellation, it's so the game never happened, and so Cincinnati never really gets a chance to perhaps defeat Buffalo at home. Now with the injury and stuff, they have to travel to Buffalo. So again, I still think that Cincinnati is a better team. I think Cincinnati will win that game. So, but above all things, Kansas City has to take care of business first.
Sure, no doubt about that. Let's hit Cincinnati and Buffalo real quick, because that is the other side of the AFC. In terms of what you just said, Cincinnati's a better team than Buffalo. But what do you think? Why do you think Cincinnati would be a more difficult matchup for Kansas City than Buffalo would be?
Well, let me say, I didn't say they were a better team. I said
Oh, okay.
I think that they will beat Buffalo.
Okay, mistake.
I just think that when it comes to Cincinnati, to me, I just think that they present nightmare matchups when it comes to their offense. And again, this is one of the biggest problems that the Chiefs have is they match up. They match up well, but it just with the Chiefs, they have a hard time of getting Joe Burrows down, and that's the thing. I think because he gets the ball out so quickly, it's hard to get a good hit on him, even though their offensive line is kind of wrecked. It's still hard. It's still hard to get to a quarterback if you're throwing the ball out in 2 seconds. Now, when it comes to this particular game, I'm looking at both of these two teams. They face their division foes in the wild card race, but I think they also expose a lot of things. For me, the biggest the biggest difference that I see in this game with Cincinnati and Buffalo is that if Josh Allen turns the ball over, which he is prone to do. Now I don't know if he's going to turn the ball over 3 times like he did against the Dolphins, but if he does that, I know that Cincinnati will be able to capitalize off of those turnovers. And look, I just don't know how well Buffalo's defense matches up with the Bengals offense, especially with their wide receivers. And so we got a small glimpse of that again in the Monday night game. They came down and scored right away. Granted, home field and crowd, that stuff did play a factor in it, but defensively they were able to keep Buffalo to just a field goal on their opening drive. So uh, again, we'll get a chance to see it in totality. I'm interested to see because the winner of Saturday's game between the Chiefs and the Jaguars, that team will have already advanced to the AFC title game by the time this game takes place. So the question is going to be: a lot of people feel like the NFL is trying to write the storyline or the storybook ending for the Buffalo Bills. And so I think it'll be more pressure on Buffalo to win that game versus Cincinnati. Cincinnati, they're pretty much playing with house money. They're not. I mean, everybody think that the fix is in because they're pushing this neutral site in Atlanta so much. It's like, well, damn, don't they got to play the game first? And
Yeah,
so,
right.
and that's fair on both sides, but I think more so Buffalo than Kansas City, and so I know people like to buy into conspiracy theories when it comes to, Carl Jeffers and stuff like that. So again, when it all boils down to, I just like the matchups that um, Cincinnati presents going up against Buffalo.
I'll make the case for and Darren Smith, our guest here, Kansas City Chiefs Radio Network pregame and postgame host, discussing Chiefs and Jaguars in the NFL Divisional weekend after an exciting wildcard weekend. Busty Vada Party here on the VPartySports podcast. And again, thanks for your time. But I'll make this statement that Josh Allen led the league in red zone turnovers this year. If he doesn't commit all those red zone turnovers, I think they win a few of those games. That first Miami game, they could have won in Miami. The Minnesota game, they were up by 17, and they lost that game, a large part due to the red zone turnovers, the Harrison Smith interception being that part of it too. So I think Buffalo, if they turn down their mistakes, I think they can be more competitive. And I know Cincinnati got to them early in that game, but I think Buffalo is very strong defensively. They seem to have leaked a little bit of oil the last few weeks. So let me ask you this from the standpoint of Kansas City. Who do you think is the better matchup for Kansas City to advance, assuming they win Saturday? Is it Buffalo or Cincinnati that gives them a tougher time?
The team that gives Kansas City more fits would be Cincinnati because in Patrick's small time there, he hasn't beaten the Bengals. I know the last 3 times in the last calendar year last year, and I can't remember if they played him during the last 4 or 5 years that he's been a quarterback. I think they have, but I don't think Burrows was a quarterback at that time. But be that as it may, I think that Cincinnati presents a bigger challenge just because this group of Chiefs and last year's group hadn't beaten them. Buffalo, they've been able to beat Kansas City in the regular season, but in the playoffs, Kansas City still have their number. So, and look, it always, this is the thing that always, worries me when it comes to division foes, but also when you face a team 2 or 3 times in the same season, what adjustments are you going to make? And so with Buffalo, there's adjustments that Kansas City can make because they lost the game, and there's reasons for them to make whatever changes need to be made, try to win that game. Same can be said for Cincinnati. So, but I think when it all boils down to, Kansas City, the Chiefs made mistakes in those two games against both. Actually, I mean, I could easily say that Kansas City could be undefeated right now because hell, if you make the field goal and the extra point against Indianapolis,
right,
you win that game. If Patrick Mahomes doesn't throw, doesn't get out, doesn't throw that interception late in the ball game against Buffalo, they win that game. And of course, if Travis Kelce doesn't fumble the ball, or doesn't have the ball stripped from him in Cincinnati, I mean, Kansas City be looking at 17-0 going. And so, I mean, there's 6-1 and half and a dozen. So the team that, to me, like I said, to answer your question, presents the biggest challenge is Cincinnati, only because they haven't beaten them yet.
All right, let's go to the game Saturday, 4:30 Eastern, 1:30 here on the West Coast where I am, 3:30 Central Time for all of you good folks in the Midwest. Chiefs offense, the best in the nation, the best in the country, the best in the NFL. Number one in points scored, number one in yards overall. Jaguars, a 5-game winning streak. They're red hot. The game against Tennessee that got them into the playoffs. It was a physical game, more physical than I've ever seen Jacksonville play. And if it wasn't for the fumble return, we'd be talking about the Tennessee Titans more so than Jacksonville. I know both South divisions in the AFC and NFC were terrible, but Jacksonville is there, and they did make a comeback. They've got momentum on their side because of that big comeback against the Chargers. They're 24th in defense, but they were 10th in points scored this year. Tell me what, from Andy Reid's perspective, what Jacksonville poses as a problem to Kansas City from the offensive and defensive sides.
Well, just overall, they've been in playoff mode over the last 3 weeks, win and get in. So they're already I don't want to say peak, but they're already playing at a high level coming into the game. Kansas City's going to have to match their intensity coming to the ball game, especially when you see a team that was 27 points down come back and win the ball game. They have a belief that they feel like they deserve to be here and that they earn the right to be here. So again, for the Chiefs, they have to first match the intensity that the Jaguars are going to get. And again, Kansas City, even though they won a game 27-17, game wasn't really as close. I know they scored a late touchdown. Harrison Butker missed an extra point in that game. So,
for my purpose, it's almost covered.
Yeah, and so and there are a lot of things that Kansas City can clean up from that ball game. Patrick Mahomes had an interception. So, the thing that I've always said with Kansas City is that if the defense is at least average, with the offense doing what it does, Kansas City should be able to get to the Super Bowl. Now I'm seeing here where they're ranked number 11, so they're almost top 10. I mean, that's saying a whole lot. And the other good thing that Kansas City has been able to do a lot, they've been able to get pressure on the quarterback and get sacks and create turnovers, actually. And so that's another good thing that Kansas City has going for them at this moment. But what it all boils down to is always going to boil down to execution. Patrick and that pass game, the run game, having a nice decent balance. With Clyde. Well, actually, Clyde was coming back, but with Isaiah Pacheco along with Jerick McKinnon, Kansas City should be okay. Then with the wide receivers, we're probably not going to see McCole Hardman, but you do get Kadarius Toney coming back and some of these other players that have mixed in. So the good thing with Patrick is Patrick has so many offensive weapons that it's really hard to double somebody. I know we'll probably see Tony, not Tony Gonzalez, but Travis Kelce.
That's a news story.
But Travis Kelce getting double. But if he's doubled, then that means somebody else is going to be open.
No doubt about it. All right, Kansas City and Jacksonville on Saturday. Tell me what does Kansas City focus on defensively? Because they scored the most points, and even though they've given up more points on average than Jacksonville has, it's because Kansas City scored 30 points. A lot of them were blowouts during the year. Do they focus on the run and ATN Jr. more, or they emphasize the pass rush and get after Lawrence a little bit because he can be rattled?
Well, you always got to worry about the run because if nothing else, the run, will keep Patrick Mahomes on the sideline. So if you don't stop that keeps the Chiefs offense on the sidelines. And so that's something that if you're Kansas City, you don't want to have that happen. Trevor Lawrence, he's a big quarterback. He's what 6'6" or whatever. So
Yeah.
I mean, and he threw for 259 yards. So I mean, so they Christian Kirk had a good game. So I mean, Kansas City was able to really limit what they were able to do on the ground. I think Travis Etienne only had like 45 yards on the ground, so it kind of took him out. But you got to remember, once the Chiefs got up on them, and they got up on them, I think 20-7, by the half. Well, now you're forcing Jacksonville to pass the ball, so you take them out their running game. So I mean, obviously, I think the biggest key is going to be for Kansas City when they get the ball. They start the ball off, and the other thing too that that happened in that game, Kansas City was to get the ball to kick off the game, and they did an onside kick to start the game off and got the ball back. Got the ball right away. So that so that was interesting. So Kansas City has to watch out for that and have to be on point, making sure that they that they're focused and that they, don't take anything for granted.
It's going to be an interesting weekend. Kansas City and Jacksonville open up the divisional series just for the V Party Sports podcast. You don't have to make a pick on it, but Kansas City 9 is favored by 9. I think that's a fair spread. Jacksonville red hot right now, as you said. They're in playoff mode, 53 the total. Let's get to the other games here a little bit because I don't want you to have to go out on a limb for Kansas City Jacksonville because it's going to be an interesting game as it is, and you're covering it.
Well, I would just take Kansas City money line. I don't mess with the points when it comes
to
the Chiefs.
Not in the playoffs. It's tough to mess with over a touchdown in the playoffs. Anyway,
I just don't mess with. Well, Kansas City would disappoint you if you go with the points. I mean, I think they covered when I can't remember. I don't know what the spread was at the time when those two teams played. So. If I remember correctly,
it was like 9.5, and they barely went down.
It was 9.5. Yes. So
it ended at 9.5. So that's what.
So they actually did cover. Yeah. So they actually did cover, but I would take the under when it comes to 53 points. I think even if Kansas City scores 27-30, right. I still think it'll be less than 53. But
Kansas City 6-10 against the spread this year. Jacksonville 9-9. Against the spread. That includes the playoff game on Saturday. Obviously, that's 18 games. So 9-53 for Jacksonville. Let's hit the other games here before got a couple more minutes with you. Philadelphia and the Giants in the NFC, San Francisco and Dallas. Let me ask you this. Out of the 4 teams, it's assuming Kansas City gets there, and I know that's a bad thing to assume that they're going to get there. Of the games you've seen, what are the NFC teams of the 4 that are left that you think will give Kansas City a rougher matchup? I still think it's San Francisco, and I'm not being biased, because I'm a Bears fan, so it has nothing to do with that. But that defensive line and the way that they ball hawk, I think of the 4 teams that are left defensively, I think San Francisco's got the best defense by points allowed and obviously by yards allowed. But they're beasts up front with Bosa and Omenihu, and then Greenlaw and Fred Warner, all pros. I just think San Francisco will be the toughest matchup for Kansas City, a repeat of 3 years ago. But San Francisco, Dallas, and Philadelphia and the Giants, they're playing for the 3rd time this year. San Francisco and Dallas, a repeat of last year's divisional game as well. Go ahead. Your thoughts on the NFC?
If I had to pick a team, probably be Philly, just because of what they can do offensively and the challenges that they create. And then, look, they have an excellent defense where adding Ndamukong Suh kind of puts the plug in the middle when it comes to running the football. San Francisco, they can make adjustments from the first time out. You got to remember, Kansas City put up 44 points on them, and that was with Christian McCaffrey and Debo Sims, even though that was the first game they had Christian. So, but they're playing much better now. So, I mean, the thing could be different. It could be a high scoring game if those 2 teams face off again. Dallas, I mean, I guess I had to see how these teams they fare.
They're pretty much Jekyll and Hyde. They played lousy for 4 weeks.
Yeah.
They came in on Monday and looked like they were world beaters. I mean, Tom Brady was 7-0 against them. I know that's not the same Tampa Bay team, and we already said how bad the South was in both conferences. So, but it's going to be a good matchup. Both series are going to be good, and then Buffalo's 5 over Cincinnati, and I think a lot of that's at home too. But I'm kind of leaning towards. I'm like you. I'm kind of leaning towards Cincinnati on that. But I'll text you what I have on Saturday morning as far as that goes. But what's the weather going to be like in Kansas City for everybody out here or out in the world watching our show right now?
If I remember, I believe it's supposed to be raining Saturday. I mean, I'll be inside. Yeah, so I think we have a 50% chance of snowflakes. So, so it's going to be interesting. Look, I think it's I think the biggest challenge for for Chiefs fans, because I'm gonna be sitting in the press box. I'm gonna be fine. But just saying one. But look, and actually the weather could be a key. Because if you're Jacksonville, obviously, you play, outside and you play and humid type weather. So that'll be interesting to see how they react to the weather if it's inclement here, because it's going to only be about 38 degrees, so it's going to be just above freezing. And good, like I said, 50% chance of snow. So it'll probably snow either during the game or leading up to it. So
Darren Smith is the pre and post game show host for the Kansas City Chiefs radio network. This weekend, the Chiefs open up their playoffs after having the number 1 seed against the Jaguars and the rest of the NFL divisional weekend. My man, I always appreciate it. Thank you very much for the time. I look forward to talking to you again. Good luck this weekend as far as the Chiefs fans go, and we will catch up with you soon. Maybe before, maybe if they get through next couple of weeks, I'll ring you up and we'll see if we can do this again sometime.
Sounds good.
All right. Darren Smith, our guest. We'll be back in 60 seconds with the rest of the podcast and the Best Bets segment. Vasi Vada Party here.